The scream that tore through the night in Abilene, Kansas in 1878 belonged to a child who would grow up learning that beauty could be stolen in an instant. But the fire that burned down the Henderson ranch claimed more than timber and livestock. It claimed the innocence of 8-year-old Clara Henderson, leaving angry red scars that twisted across the left side of her face from temple to jaw. A permanent reminder of the night she pulled her baby brother from the flames while her parents perished in the inferno. 10 years had passed since that terrible night, and Clara stood behind the counter of the general store. She now managed for her elderly aunt in the dusty town of Dodge City, Kansas. The year was 1888, and the Wild West was slowly giving way to civilization, though the rough edges remained sharp enough to cut. Clara had learned to keep her scarred cheek turned away from customers, her long chestnut hair arranged to fall forward like a curtain between her damaged skin and the cruel eyes of the world. She was 18 now, old enough to understand that some wounds never truly healed, no matter how much time passed. The bell above the door jangled, and 3 ranch hands from the double R spread stumbled in, their breath reeking of whiskey even though it was barely past noon. Clara recognized them immediately, her stomach tightening with familiar dread. These men came in every few weeks, and they never missed an opportunity to remind her of what she had become. Well, if it isn't Half-Face Henderson, the tallest one, a man named Dutch, called out with a cruel laugh. "Turn around, girl, let us see that pretty side of yours." Clara kept her eyes on the ledger in front of her, her fingers gripping the pencil so tightly her knuckles turned white. "What can I help you gentlemen with today, gentlemen?" another one mocked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "She thinks we're gentlemen, boys. That's rich, coming from a girl who looks like she wrestled with the devil himself and lost." The third man, younger than the others but no less cruel, leaned across the counter. "My ma says it's a blessing you got those scars, Clara. Says it saved some poor fool from marrying you and finding out too late what an ugly wife he'd gotten himself." The words landed like physical blows, each one finding its mark in the tender places of her heart that had never quite scarred over like her face had. Clara forced herself to breathe evenly to not let them see how deeply they cut. She had survived fire. She would survive this too. "Flour, sugar, and coffee," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears burning behind her eyes. "That is what you ordered last time." "Is that what you need today?" Dutch slammed his hand on the counter, making her jump. "Look at me when I'm talking to you, girl, or are you too ashamed to show that monster face of yours?" Before Clara could respond, the door opened again, and the energy in the room shifted like the air before a lightning strike. A man stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wore dusty trail clothes and a gun belt that sat low on his hips, and there was something in the way he carried himself that spoke of quiet confidence rather than bravado. "Problem here?" The stranger's voice was low and calm, but there was steel underneath the velvet. Dutch straightened up, sizing up the newcomer. "No problem, friend, just having a bit of fun with the girl here. No harm meant." The stranger's eyes moved to Clara, and she instinctively turned her head, letting her hair fall forward to hide her scars. But something made her glance back at him, and when their eyes met, she saw no disgust, no pity, no cruel amusement, just a quiet intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "Didn't sound like fun to me," the stranger said, his gaze moving back to the 3 ranch hands. "Sounded like 3 grown men picking on a young woman trying to do her job. Where I come from, we call that cowardice." The air in the store grew thick with tension. Dutch's hand moved toward his gun, but the stranger was faster, his hand resting on his own weapon with casual ease that suggested he knew exactly how to use it. "I don't think you want to do that," the stranger said quietly. "I'm just passing through this town and I'd prefer not to cause any trouble, but I will if I have to." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Dutch backed down, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. "This isn't over," he muttered, gesturing to his companions. "Come on, boys. Let's get out of this place. Smells like burned flesh in here anyway." They filed out, slamming the door hard enough to make the bell clatter wildly. Clara stood frozen behind the counter, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The stranger turned back to her, and she waited for him to make some excuse and leave, the way most people did once they got a good look at her face. Instead, he removed his hat and approached the counter with a gentle smile. "I apologize if I overstepped, miss. But I couldn't stand by and listen to that kind of talk." Clara found her voice, though it came out shakier than she would have liked. "You did not have to do that. They are just words. I am used to it." "That doesn't make it right," he said firmly, then his expression softened. "I'm James Cordell. Most people call me Cord. I just rode in from Colorado looking for work as a horse trainer, heard there might be opportunities in this area." "Clara Henderson," she replied automatically, then wished she had not. Everyone in Dodge City knew the Henderson name, knew the story of the fire and the scarred girl who survived it, but Cord just nodded as if she had told him something perfectly ordinary. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Henderson. I'm hoping you might be able to point me toward a decent boarding house and maybe give me some advice about which ranches might be hiring." Clara blinked, surprised that he was not making excuses to leave. "There is a boarding house 2 streets over Mrs. Patterson's place. She keeps clean rooms and serves good meals. As for ranches, the Bar T spread about 5 miles north is always looking for good hands. The foreman there is a fair man named Samuel Wright." Cord's smile widened, and Clara found herself noticing how it changed his entire face, making him look younger and more approachable. "Thank you kindly. That's very helpful." He paused, then added, "I'll need to stock up on some supplies before I head out to the Bar T. Think you could help me with that?" For the next half hour, Clara helped Cord select the items he needed, from coffee and beans to rope and leather oil. He was easy to talk to, asking her opinion on various products and listening carefully to her recommendations. Not once did he stare at her scars or turn away in disgust. He looked her straight in the eye when he spoke to her, as if her appearance was the least interesting thing about her. As she tallied up his purchases, Cord said casually, "Those men who were in here earlier, they bother you often?" Clara's hand stilled on the ledger. "Sometimes, it is nothing I cannot handle." "I'm sure you can handle it," Cord agreed, "but that doesn't mean you should have to." He paid for his supplies, counting out coins carefully. "I have a feeling I'll be back this way often if I get that job at the Bar T. It's good to know there is a reliable store in town." Something warm unfurled in Clara's chest, something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of it. "I hope you get the position, Mr. Cordell." "Cord," he corrected with a smile. "And thank you, Miss Henderson. I'll see you again soon." After he left, Clara stood in the empty store, her fingers touching her scarred cheek absently. She told herself not to read too much into a simple act of kindness, not to let her imagination run wild with possibilities that would only lead to disappointment. Men like James Cordell did not fall for girls like her. They were polite, maybe even friendly, but they did not see past the scars to whatever might lie beneath. But when Cord returned to the store 3 days later, his face lit up with genuine pleasure at seeing her. Clara felt that dangerous hope bloom a little brighter in her chest. "I got the job," he announced, setting a list on the counter. "Mr. Wright hired me on the spot after I showed him what I could do with a half-wild mare they've been having trouble with, said I have a gift with horses." "That is wonderful," Clara said, and she meant it. "Congratulations, Cord." "I'll be in town every week or so for supplies," he continued, his eyes holding hers. "I was hoping you might recommend a good place to get a decent meal. Mrs. Patterson's cooking is fine, but a man likes a little variety." Clara hesitated, then said, "The cafe 2 doors down serves excellent stew on Wednesdays, and the hotel restaurant has good steaks on Friday nights. Would you consider joining me for one of those meals sometime?" Cord asked, his voice casual but his eyes intent. I don't know many people in Dodge City yet, and it would be nice to have some company. The question caught Clara completely off guard. She stared at him, searching for signs of mockery or pity, but found neither. Why would you want to have dinner with me? Cord looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Because I enjoy talking to you. You're knowledgeable about the area and you have a good sense of humor. Why wouldn't I want to have dinner with you? Because I am hideous, Clara wanted to say. Because people stare when I go out in public. Because I will embarrass you and ruin your reputation before you have even established yourself in this town. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped behind years of isolation and loneliness. I am not sure that is a good idea, she said finally, dropping her gaze to the counter. Well, think about it, Cord said easily, not pushing. The offer stands whenever you're ready. He picked up his supplies and tipped his hat to her. See you next week, Clara. She watched him go, her heart a confused tangle of longing and fear. No one had asked her to dinner in years. No one looked at her the way Cord did, as if her scars were just another feature, no more or less important than the color of her eyes or the shape of her nose. Over the following weeks, Cord became a regular fixture in the general store. He came by at least twice a week, always with a friendly greeting and a few minutes to chat. He told her about his work at the bar T, about the horses he was training and the progress they were making. He asked about her life, her interests, and actually listened to her answers with genuine attention. Clara found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and terrified her. She started taking more care with her appearance, wearing her nicest dresses when she knew he might come by. She practiced conversations in her head, trying to be more interesting, more engaging, anything to keep him coming back. But she also braced herself for the inevitable moment when his interest would fade, when he would realize what everyone else in town already knew, that Clara Henderson was damaged goods, a girl whose outer scars reflected the brokenness inside. That moment seemed to arrive on a hot afternoon in July when Dutch and his companions returned to the store. This time they were drunker than usual, meaner, their eyes glittering with malicious intent. There she is, Dutch slurred, pointing at Clara, the ugliest girl in all of Kansas. I bet you a whole month's wages, boys, that she's never even been kissed. Who would want to kiss that face? One of the others jeered. You'd have to put a bag over her head first. Clara's face burned with humiliation, but she kept her voice steady. Please leave. You are drunk and causing a disturbance. Oh, she wants us to leave, Dutch mocked, moving closer. But we're paying customers, aren't we? And the customer is always right. He reached across the counter suddenly, grabbing her wrist before she could pull away. Let's see what you look like under all that hair, monster girl. Clara tried to jerk away, but his grip was too strong. He yanked her forward, his other hand reaching for her hair, and panic exploded in her chest. She was 8 years old again, trapped in the burning house, flames licking at her face while she screamed for help. Then suddenly Dutch was flying backward, released from some invisible force, and Cord was there, his face dark with fury. He had Dutch by the collar, lifting him almost off his feet despite the man's size. I believe the lady asked you to leave, Cord said, his voice deadly quiet. And I suggest you do exactly that before I forget I'm trying to be a law-abiding citizen. Dutch struggled, but Cord's grip was iron. The other two ranch hands started forward, but Cord's free hand moved to his gun with that same casual efficiency Clara had seen before. I wouldn't, he advised. The sheriff chose that moment to appear in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. He was an older man with a weathered face and sharp eyes that took in the situation instantly. Problem here, Cord? Just escorting some gentleman out, Sheriff, Cord replied, his tone conversational despite the tension in his body. They've had a bit too much to drink and forgot their manners. The sheriff's expression hardened as he looked at Dutch and his companions. That so? Well, I think you boys need to spend a night in my jail sobering up, give you time to remember how we treat ladies in this town. After the sheriff had hauled the 3 men away, Cord turned to Clara, his anger melting into concern. Are you all right? Did he hurt you? Clara was shaking, her breath coming in short gasps as she tried to control the panic still racing through her veins. "I am fine, thank you." "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Cord said firmly. He came around the counter and Clara instinctively stepped back, her hand going to her scarred cheek in an automatic gesture of self-protection. Cord stopped, giving her space, but his eyes were intense. "Clara, why do you let people treat you like that?" "Because I have no choice," she said, her voice breaking. "Look at me, Cord, this is what I am, this is all I will ever be, a monster just like they say." "Don't," Cord said sharply, taking a step closer. "Don't say that. Don't you dare believe that." "How can I not?" Clara cried, tears streaming down her face now, running over the twisted landscape of her scars. "Every day people look at me with disgust or pity, children run away, men mock me. I am hideous, and no amount of kindness from you or anyone else will change that." Cord closed the distance between them in 2 strides. Before Clara could react, he reached up and gently, so gently, cupped her scarred cheek in his hand. His touch was warm and calloused from years of working with horses, and it was the first time in a decade that anyone had touched her scars without flinching. "You are not hideous," he said, his voice rough with emotion. His thumb traced the line of a scar, the touch reverent rather than repulsed. "You are beautiful to me, Clara. So damn beautiful it makes my chest ache every time I see you." Clara froze, unable to breathe, unable to think. Surely she had misheard. Surely this was some cruel joke, the punchline waiting to devastate her completely. But when she looked into Cord's eyes, she saw nothing but raw, honest truth staring back at her. "How?" she whispered. "How can you possibly think that?" "Because I see you," Cord said simply. "Not your scars, you, the woman who survived a fire that killed her parents and saved her brother's life. The woman who has endured years of cruelty and never let it make her cruel in return. The woman who gives honest advice and has a laugh like music and lights up like the sun when she talks about the books she loves to read." His other hand came up to frame her face, both his palms cradling her cheeks as if she were something precious. "The scars are just part of your story, Clara. They don't define you, and they sure as hell don't make you any less beautiful." "I don't understand," Clara breathed, but she did not pull away from his touch. She could not. After so many years of isolation, of believing herself unworthy of tenderness, his gentle hands on her face felt like rain after a drought. "Then let me make it clear," Cord said, and he leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to move away. When she did not, when she instead swayed toward him like a flower toward sunlight, he kissed her. It was soft and sweet and perfect, nothing like the rough, mocking kiss she had once received from a drunk cowboy on a dare. Cord kissed her as if she were delicate and treasured, as if this moment mattered more than anything else in the world. Clara's eyes fluttered closed, her hands coming up to grip his shirt as if he were the only solid thing in a spinning universe. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cord rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that since the first day I walked into this store and saw you trying so hard to be invisible. But Clara, you could never be invisible. Not to me, Cord," Clara whispered, her voice shaking. "People will talk. They will say terrible things about you for being with someone like me." "Let them talk," Cord said fiercely. "I don't give a damn what anyone thinks. I know what I want, and what I want is you, if you will have me." Clara pulled back slightly to search his face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. She found none. What she found instead was a man who looked at her as if she hung the moon and stars, who touched her scars as if they were something beautiful rather than something to hide. "I am afraid," she admitted. "I am afraid of believing this is real and then losing it." "I'm afraid too," Cord confessed. "I'm afraid of not being good enough for you, of letting you down somehow, but I would rather be afraid with you than safe without you." The words unlocked something in Clara's chest, some cage that had held her heart prisoner for too long. She rose up on her toes and kissed him again, pouring years of loneliness and longing into the press of her lips against his. Cord responded with equal passion, his arms wrapping around her waist and pulling her close. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet store, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows and painting everything gold. For the first time since the fire, Clara felt truly warm, truly safe, truly seen when they finally separated. Cord smiled down at her. "Have dinner with me tonight. Let me court you properly the way you deserve." Clara thought about her aunt, who would be scandalized. She thought about the townspeople who would gossip and stare. She thought about all the reasons this was a bad idea, all the ways it could go wrong. Then she thought about the way Cord's hand had felt on her scarred cheek, gentle and sure and accepting, and she nodded. "Yes. I would like that very much." That evening, Clara wore her best dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She arranged her hair carefully, but for the first time she did not use it to hide her scars. If Cord could see past them, maybe it was time she stopped hiding. Cord called for her at the small house she shared with her aunt, looking handsome in clean clothes with his dark hair still damp from washing. Her aunt, a sharp-eyed woman named Judith, looked him up and down with obvious suspicion. "You are the horse trainer from the bar T," Aunt Judith said. It was not a question. "Yes, ma'am," Cord replied politely. "James Cordell, I'm here to take Miss Clara to dinner with your permission." Aunt Judith's eyes narrowed. Why? The blunt question would have embarrassed Clara if she had not been expecting it. Her aunt had always been protective, perhaps overly so, convinced that any man who showed interest in Clara must have ulterior motives. But Cord met Aunt Judith's suspicious gaze steadily. "Because your niece is smart, kind, and beautiful, and I consider myself fortunate that she agreed to spend the evening with me." Something shifted in Aunt Judith's expression. She studied Cord for another long moment, then looked at Clara, who was holding her breath. Finally, the older woman nodded. "Have her home by 9 o'clock, not a minute later." "Yes, ma'am," Cord agreed. He offered his arm to Clara, who took it with a flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach. They walked to the hotel restaurant, and Clara was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. But every time her courage faltered, Cord would lean down and say something that made her laugh, or he would squeeze her hand reassuringly, and the whispers would fade into background noise. The restaurant was busy, filled with the usual mix of ranchers, businessmen, and travelers. The hostess, a woman named Margaret who had gone to school with Clara and had never missed an opportunity to remind her of her scars, looked shocked when they entered together. "Table for two," Cord said pleasantly, as if he did not notice Margaret's wide-eyed stare. "Of course," Margaret said slowly, still gaping at Clara. "Right this way." She led them to a table in the back corner, clearly hoping to hide them away where they would not upset the other diners, but Cord shook his head. "Actually, we would prefer that table by the window if it is available." Margaret's mouth opened and closed. "But that's our best table. It's usually reserved for paying customers," Cord interrupted smoothly, "which we are. So if you don't mind," flustered, Margaret showed them to the window table. Clara sat down, her cheeks burning, but Cord just smiled at her as if they had accomplished something wonderful. And maybe they had. Maybe claiming space in the world, refusing to hide in the shadows, was its own small victory. Dinner was perfect. Cord told her stories about his childhood in Colorado, about learning to train horses from his father and traveling through various territories before settling in Kansas. Clara talked about her brother, who was now 11 and living with relatives in Missouri, and about her love of books and learning. "I used to dream of becoming a teacher," Clara admitted. "Before the fire, I loved school, loved reading and writing, but after," she gestured to her face. "Parents would not want someone like me teaching their children." "Their loss," Cord said firmly. "You would make an excellent teacher." He paused, then added, "But if you still want that dream, Clara, don't let anyone tell you that you cannot have it. The world is changing. There is room in it for people who are brave enough to take up space." His words stirred something in Clara, some long-dormant ambition that had been buried under years of shame and self-doubt. "Maybe," she said softly, "maybe someday." As they finished their meal, a commotion near the bar drew their attention. Dutch and his two companions had been released from jail and were drowning their humiliation in more whiskey. When Dutch spotted Clara and Cord at their table, his face twisted with rage. "Well, look at that," he announced loudly, staggering toward them. "The monster found herself a man, or did you pay him, girl? Is that how it works?" Cord stood up slowly, his expression dangerous. "Walk away, Dutch, right now, or what?" Dutch sneered. "You going to shoot me for telling the truth? She's hideous and everyone in this town knows it. I'm just wondering what she's got to offer a man like you. Must be something mighty special under those skirts to make up for that face." The restaurant went silent. Clara felt every eye on her, felt the weight of their judgment and curiosity. Shame washed over her in waves, drowning the happiness of the evening. But before she could stand, before she could flee like she wanted to, Cord moved. He grabbed Dutch by the shirt front and hauled him close. "You're going to apologize to Miss Henderson," Cord said quietly, his voice carrying nonetheless in the silent restaurant. "You are going to apologize for every cruel word you have ever spoken to her, and then you are going to leave this establishment and never bother her again. Do you understand me?" Dutch tried to pull away, but Cord's grip was unbreakable. "I won't apologize to that." Cord's fist connected with Dutch's jaw with a crack that made several women gasp. Dutch dropped like a stone, unconscious before he hit the floor. His companions started forward, but the sheriff, who had been having dinner in the corner, stood up. "I think you boys should collect your friend and head home," the sheriff said mildly, "before I decide to charge you with disturbing the peace and lock you up for a week this time." They dragged Dutch out, casting dark looks back at Cord, who stood watching them with his arms crossed. The sheriff approached their table as Cord sat back down. "I appreciate you defending Miss Henderson," the sheriff said, "but try not to make a habit of brawling in public establishments, Cord." "Yes, sir," Cord agreed. "I'll do my best as long as people remember their manners around Clara." The sheriff nodded, then turned to Clara with surprising gentleness. "Your father was a good man, Clara. He would be proud of you for surviving what you did and making a life for yourself. Don't let fools like Dutch make you forget that." After he left, Clara found tears streaming down her face. Cord reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "Are you all right? No one has ever defended me like that before," Clara whispered. "Not since my parents died." "Then they were all fools," Cord said. "But I'm not. And I promise you, Clara, as long as I'm around, no one will make you feel less than the incredible woman you are." Over the following months, Cord kept that promise. He courted Clara with a determination and tenderness that slowly, gradually, broke down the walls she had built around her heart. They had dinner together every week. He took her on picnics outside of town, where they could talk for hours without the weight of judgmental stares. He brought her books from the traveling merchants and wild flowers from the prairie. And through it all, he treated her scars as just another part of her. He touched them often, casual caresses that said more clearly than words that he found nothing about her repulsive. When they were alone, he would trace the lines with his fingers or press kisses to the damaged skin. And Clara slowly began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was not the monster she had always believed herself to be. By winter, Clara knew she was in love with James Cordell. She knew it in the way her heart lifted every time she saw him, in the way his absence made the world seem grayer and less vibrant. She knew it in the way she wanted to tell him everything, share every thought and dream and fear, because he listened as if her words mattered more than anything else. And she was almost certain he felt the same way, though neither of them had spoken the words aloud yet. On Christmas Eve, Cord took Clara to see the church's nativity display. Snow was falling softly, dusting the streets of Dodge City with white, and the church was lit up with candles that made it glow like a beacon in the darkness. They stood together looking at the simple wooden figures, their breath misting in the cold air. "I was thinking," Cord said quietly, his arm around Clara's waist, "about what comes next." Clara's heart started to pound. "What do you mean?" Cord turned to face her, his expression serious. "I have a bit of money saved up from my work at the bar T. Enough to buy some land, maybe start my own horse ranch. It won't be anything fancy at first, but it would be ours. A place to build something real." "Ours," Clara repeated, hardly daring to hope. Cord reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a simple gold band with a small emerald set in it. "Marry me, Clara. Be my wife, my partner, the mother of my children someday if we are blessed. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you how beautiful you are, how much you are loved." Clara stared at the ring, tears blurring her vision. "Cord, are you certain people will talk? They will say you could do so much better than me." "There is no better than you," Cord said firmly. He took the ring from the box and held it up between them. "You are strong and brave and kind. You survived things that would have broken most people, and you came through it with your heart intact. You make me laugh. You challenge me to be better. And you are so damn beautiful that sometimes I can't breathe when I look at you." He paused, his own voice growing rough with emotion. "So yes, Clara Henderson, I am certain. The question is whether you will take a chance on a wandering horse trainer with more dreams than common sense." Clara laughed through her tears, the sound bright and joyful in the quiet night. She held out her left hand, and Cord slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her there in the snow, in front of the church, in front of anyone who cared to see. And Clara kissed him back with all the love and hope and gratitude in her heart, finally allowing herself to believe that happiness was not just for other people. It was for her too. They were married in March of 1889, in a small ceremony attended by Aunt Judith, Cord's boss from the bar T, the sheriff, and a handful of others who had come to respect Clara for her quiet strength. Clara wore a cream-colored dress that Aunt Judith had helped her sew, and she wore her hair pulled back, her scars visible for everyone to see, because she was done hiding. She was done being ashamed of surviving. Cord had bought 20 acres of land about 10 miles outside of Dodge City with a small house and enough pasture for horses. It was not much, but to Clara, it looked like paradise. They moved in immediately after the wedding, and Clara threw herself into making it a home. Life as a rancher's wife was harder than Clara had anticipated. There were chickens to feed, a garden to tend, meals to cook, and endless cleaning. But there was also freedom in the isolation, in being away from the judgmental eyes of town. And there was profound joy in building something with Cord, in working side by side toward shared goals. Cord's horse training business grew quickly. He had a gift for working with difficult animals, a patience and intuition that made even the wildest horses settle under his hands. Word spread, and soon ranchers from all over the territory were bringing him horses to train. Clara helped where she could, managing the books and handling correspondence, and discovered she had a head for business. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. There were late nights worried about money, disagreements about how to run the ranch, moments when the weight of building a life from nothing seemed overwhelming. But through it all, they had each other. Cord never once made Clara feel like her scars were a burden or an embarrassment. And Clara learned to accept his love without constantly questioning whether she deserved it. In the spring of 1890, Clara realized she was pregnant. She told Cord over breakfast one morning, her hands shaking as she held her coffee cup. Cord went very still, then let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the horses. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen until she was laughing and dizzy. "We are having a baby," he kept repeating as if he could not quite believe it. "Clara, we are going to be parents." The pregnancy was difficult. Clara was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep food down. But Cord was patient and attentive, bringing her ginger tea and holding her hair back when she was ill. As her belly swelled with their child, he would talk to it at night, his hand resting on her stomach, telling stories and making promises about the life they would give this baby. Clara's fears about the baby inheriting her scars proved groundless when their son was born in January of 1891. He was perfect, with Cord's dark hair and Clara's blue eyes, and lungs that could wake the dead. They named him Michael, after Clara's father. Being a mother terrified Clara in ways she had not anticipated. She found herself constantly checking on Michael, afraid something would happen to him the way things had happened to her. But Cord was a steady presence, reminding her that they could not protect their son from everything, that all they could do was love him fiercely and teach him to be brave. As Michael grew from infant to toddler to small boy, the ranch grew too. Cord bought more land, more horses. Clara started teaching some of the ranch hands' children to read and write in the evenings, fulfilling that old dream of becoming a teacher in a way she had never expected. The house expanded, growing new rooms and a wide porch where they would sit on summer evenings, watching Michael play in the yard. In 1893, Clara gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Sarah. They had their mother's chestnut hair and their father's storm-gray eyes, and they were born screaming their displeasure at having to share the world from the very beginning. Michael, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sisters, constantly wanting to help care for them. Life was full and chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. Some days Clara could hardly believe this was her reality, that she got to wake up next to Cord every morning, that she had children who loved her without seeing her scars as anything but part of who she was. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Cord took Clara back into Dodge City for dinner at the same restaurant where they had their first date. They walked through the streets hand in hand, and Clara noticed that people no longer stared at her scars, or perhaps they did, and she simply no longer cared. At the restaurant, Margaret the hostess greeted them with genuine warmth. "Mr. and Mrs. Cordell, how wonderful to see you. I heard your ranch is doing very well." "It is, thank you," Clara replied with a smile. They were shown to that same window table, and as they sat down, Clara looked across at her husband. Cord had a few more lines around his eyes now, and there was gray starting to thread through his dark hair. But he was still the handsomest man she had ever seen, and the way he looked at her still made her heart skip. "What are you thinking about?" Cord asked, reaching across to take her hand. "About how different my life is from what I thought it would be," Clara said honestly. "About how I never believed I could have this. A husband who loves me, children, a home." "You deserve all of it and more," Cord said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing her scarred wrist, where the marks from the fire had left their trace. "You are the strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known, Clara Cordell, and I fall more in love with you every single day." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you too, so much that sometimes I think my heart might burst from it." They had dinner and talked about their plans for the future. Cord wanted to expand the horse breeding operation, maybe start training for the military. Clara wanted to build a proper schoolhouse on their land, somewhere the local children could come for a real education. They talked about taking the children to see Clara's brother in Missouri, and about maybe building a bigger house now that their family was growing. As they left the restaurant, walking back through the lamplit streets, Clara caught sight of her reflection in a shop window. For a moment, she saw what she always used to see, the scars that twisted across her face, the damaged skin that marked her as different. But then Cord's arm came around her waist, and she saw something else too. She saw a woman who had survived, a woman who was loved. A woman who had built a beautiful life out of the ashes of tragedy. She saw herself the way Cord had always seen her, not as a victim, not as a monster, but as someone worthy of love and happiness and all the good things the world had to offer. Years passed in a blur of golden moments. Michael grew into a tall, serious boy who loved horses as much as his father did. The twins were wild and fearless, always getting into mischief and keeping Clara on her toes. In 1896, Clara gave birth to another son, Benjamin, who was quiet and thoughtful and loved books almost as much as his mother did. The Cordell Ranch became one of the most successful horse operations in Kansas. Cord's reputation as a trainer spread throughout the West, and people came from as far as Texas and Oklahoma to buy his horses. Clara's little school grew too, eventually becoming an official schoolhouse with nearly 20 students from surrounding ranches. Clara never forgot those dark years after the fire, when she believed herself unworthy of love or happiness. But she no longer let those years define her. The scars on her face became just another part of her story, proof that she had survived, that she was strong enough to endure whatever life threw at her. And she had taught her children to see scars, whether visible or invisible, not as weaknesses, but as evidence of battles won, of life lived with courage and determination. On a warm evening in June of 1898, the entire Cordell family gathered on the porch of their sprawling ranch house. Michael was 7 now, already showing signs of becoming as good a horseman as his father. The twins were 5, their bright laughter filling the air as they chased fireflies in the yard. Benjamin, at 2 years old, sat contentedly in Clara's lap, sucking his thumb. Cord sat beside Clara in the rocking chair he had built for her, his hand resting on her knee. They watched their children play in the fading light, and Clara felt a deep contentment settle over her like a warm blanket. "Do you ever regret it?" Cord asked suddenly. "Marrying me, I mean. Taking on this life instead of something easier, something more conventional." Clara turned to look at him, surprised. "Regret it? Cord, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. This life, these children, this ranch, all of it is more than I ever dreamed possible. Why would you ask that?" Cord shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "I just want to make sure you are happy, that I have given you the life you deserve." Clara set Benjamin down gently, then moved to straddle Cord's lap, her hands framing his face the way he had framed hers all those years ago in the general store. "James Cordell, you have given me everything. You gave me back my life when I thought it was over. You showed me that I was worthy of love, that my scars did not define me. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose." She leaned in and kissed him softly. "I am so happy I sometimes think I might burst from it, and it is all because of you." Cord's arms came around her waist, holding her close. "I am the lucky one," he murmured against her lips. "Every day I wake up next to you, I thank God that I walked into that general store in Dodge City. That I was brave enough to see past what everyone else saw to the incredible woman underneath." They sat like that for a while, wrapped in each other's arms while their children played and the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. And Clara thought about that terrified, broken girl she had been, the one who believed she would never be loved, never have a family, never know what it felt like to be truly happy. That girl would have been amazed to see where life had led her. She would have been astounded to know that one cowboy's gentle touch and honest words could change everything, could open up a world of possibilities she had never dared to imagine. But more than that, Clara hoped that girl would be proud. Proud of the woman she had become, the life she had built, the love she had found and nurtured and allowed to flourish. Because in the end, the scars that everyone had focused on for so long had become the least interesting thing about Clara Cordell. They were just marks on skin, old wounds that had healed as well as they could. What mattered was everything else: her strength, her kindness, her intelligence, her capacity for love, and she had one man to thank for helping her see that. One cowboy who had looked at her scarred face and seen beauty. Who had touched her damaged skin with reverence and said the words that changed her life forever. "You are beautiful to me." Those words had been the beginning. But the love that followed, the life they built together, the family they created, that was the real story. That was the happily ever after that Clara had never believed she could have. As the last light faded from the sky and Cord called the children inside for bed, Clara took one last look at the ranch spread out before her. The house they had built together, the corrals filled with horses, the garden she tended, the schoolhouse where she taught. All of it was proof that even the darkest chapters could lead to the brightest endings. That scars, whether on the skin or the soul, did not have to define a person's future. That love, real love, saw past the surface to the true worth underneath. And as she followed her family inside, Clara's hand unconsciously went to her scarred cheek. But this time, it was not a gesture of shame or self-consciousness. It was simply acknowledgement. This was part of her story, but it was not the whole story. The whole story included everything else: survival and strength, heartbreak and healing, loneliness and love. And most importantly, it included the cowboy who had seen her, truly seen her, and decided she was exactly what he wanted. Years later, when Clara was an old woman with grown children and grandchildren playing at her feet, someone asked her what the secret to a happy marriage was. She thought for a long moment, her weathered hand resting in Cord's equally weathered one, before answering. "Find someone who sees you," she said simply. "Not what other people think you are or what society says you should be. Find someone who looks at you and sees the truth of who you are, scars and all, and loves you for it. That is where happiness lies." And when she looked at Cord, his eyes still held that same intensity, that same deep affection that had changed her life all those years ago in a dusty general store in Dodge City. He squeezed her hand gently, and Clara knew that even after all these years, after all the challenges and triumphs they had shared, he still saw her the same way: beautiful, worthy, loved, and that made all the difference.